Hey guys, what's going on? It's Amber with AMBG, and today we're going to be talking about Biomutant. This is a game that's coming out on May 25th for the PS4, Xbox One, and PC, coming out of Experiment 101. This game was announced back in 2017, and it's been flying under the radar for a few years. They haven't really been announcing too many things for it up until recently, and we're going to go over that. This isn't going to be a super in-depth preview. I'm not going to get too deep into the weeds about the game. I'm just going to keep it at a very high level. I'm one of those people where I like to see previews about a game, but if it goes too deep into it and kind of spoils some of the things for me, I just tend not to like that. I like to find out things for myself. I am going to go over a little bit about the story. I'm going to go over a little bit about the morality system and a little bit about the combat. I'm also going to cover a little bit of the customization, some of the RPG mechanics. Remember, if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, and if you want to support the channel further, consider subscribing. It would really help, and I would really appreciate it. Let's get down to the brass tacks. The developer Experiment 101 has described the game as a post-apocalyptic kung fu fable RPG. Now, this is definitely a description that I've never heard for a game before, but to be honest, this is one of the most unique looking games to come out in recent history, and I think that's why so many people are drawn to it. It's got these bright, vibrant colors. You play as these cute or ugly looking mutants, and honestly, it just looks so unique compared to a lot of the open world games that have come out over the past few years. Let's start out by talking a little bit about the story of the game, because I feel like that's definitely going to be the next question after you see a trailer for Biomutant. You're going to look at it like, wow, that looks really cool, it looks really unique, but what is it about? You play as a mutant, and there are 6 warring tribes who are fighting over the heart of the planet. They're fighting over the World Tree. This is a post-apocalyptic world where an oil plague has infected the Tree of Life, and you are trying to return vitality to the world. It's your job to save it while uniting the world's tribes. And with those 6 tribes, you are able to align yourself to one of them. Now, there is a morality system, or I believe what they're calling an aura system, where there are good tribes and there are bad tribes, and you also have light and dark decisions to make throughout the course of the game that will affect the story and the outcome. Whether it's via dialogue or whether it's via actions, all the choices that you make will affect your aura throughout the game. I'm going to leave the story at that. I'm not going to get too deep into it. I think that that's a really interesting setup for the story, and I can't wait to see where it goes. Let's get on to the combat next, because I definitely think that that's something that people are interested to see. The trailers are making the combat look really fun, but what system is it really pulling from? What are its inspirations? Now, from everything that I've read and I've been hearing around the internet is that the combat kind of looks like a mix of DMC, being Devil May Cry. As you can see, all of the combos that you can do. You can see the slashing and the hacking kind of combat is also there, but there's also guns in it. There's just so much interesting things going on with the combat. I think that there's going to be a lot of flexibility with it. Now, another thing that's really interesting, if you remember from the description of the game from the developers themselves, being called a kung fu fable, and that's because for each one of the tribes, there's actually a wung fu technique that is unique to each tribe, and I think that's also really interesting. Because you might prefer one style over another. It may make you side with one tribe over another. And now each tribe is obviously going to be unique. Their approach to saving the World Tree is probably going to be unique, or perhaps they have ulterior motives that you can obviously choose to align with or not. Now, going off of the combat, despite the fact that it's filled with all these different combos and perhaps guns and other things like that, a huge part of this game, as you've probably seen in the trailer so far, is the weapon customization. This is a tinkerer's dream. You can combine stuff like from a shoe to a traffic cone to a refrigerator door. So many different combinations that also have elemental effects. So not only are your weapons probably going to look ridiculous, but they're going to have really awesome elemental effects that are going to change up your playstyle. Also have to make you change up your weapons based on what type of enemy you're fighting. Speaking of customization in general, is huge in Biomutant. You guys may have already seen some of the other preview videos for it, but you can actually see that your stats will actually affect how your character looks. Each character is going to look distinctly different, and there are different mutations for each class of character that you are trying to make. So for example, if you give your character a lot more strength than perhaps over your intelligence stat, your character's arms are going to be huge, their arms, their chest, their back is going to be huge, and they're going to have a really tiny head, and vice versa. And this is all down to your liking. You can fit this however you like. Now, the next thing that I want to go into is a little bit about the world itself and traversal, because being an open world game, how you traverse an open world game can heavily dictate your enjoyment of it. And I think that they've nailed this here. Again, in a lot of the preview videos, you're seeing them riding mounts, you're seeing a wingsuit that looks like it was ripped right out of Breath of the Wild, and I think that this is great. One interesting fact that the developer has actually shared with the public is that the map is 8 square kilometers. It is a 4x4 map, which probably isn't as big as I'd expect out of most modern open world games. Obviously, we know that developers are going for, the bigger the better. Just look at Assassin's Creed as a franchise. But I think that this is a good move from the developer. I would rather have a smaller open world map filled to the brim with things to do and places to go, as opposed to a giant map where you're spending half of the map just crossing it and there's nothing happening. That's my personal preference. Everyone is free to have their own. And that's not even to say that I don't enjoy the recent Assassin's Creed games. In fact, I love them. I loved Assassin's Creed Odyssey, but that's aside the point. Another really interesting fact about the Traversal is that you actually have access to the entire world after about 30 minutes of gameplay. But what's interesting is that the game has a huge focus on elemental resistances. So there are different biomes within the worlds that you will have either innate or inherent resistances to. So my understanding of is that when you start out the game, you're going to give your mutant an innate elemental resistance. That's the one that they are essentially created with. You'll be able to traverse that biome easier than if you had picked, obviously, a different elemental resistance. But that's not to say that you aren't locked out of the other biomes, it's just that you are going to take damage. And there is a risk versus reward aspect here, where if you want to traverse into another biome and try and get some loot really quickly, you do have the option to do that. I think that there are a lot of people who are going to break the game with this type of mechanic, but I think that's really cool. So do I go into the area and try and get some high-level loot that I'm technically not supposed to have access to yet? Or do I just play it safe and play through the story and unlock the map as I'm supposed to? Oh, one more thing that I actually want to mention. I want to give a huge round of applause to Experiment 101 for their transparency on what's been going on with development. They initially had set out a release date for sometime in 2019, but then they decided to opt out against that. Their reasoning for it is that they wanted to make sure that they could fix all of the bugs and they could finish development without crunch. And I know that crunch has been a huge topic in the gaming industry recently, especially with the recent release of Cyberpunk 2077 and all the news that came out of that. I don't think I need to cover that. But another thing that they've done recently is they've put out gameplay videos from all of the platforms that the game is going to release on, barring the Xbox Series X and PS5. But if you go to Biomutant's Twitter account, which I will link down below, you can see that they've put out uncut, commentary-free gameplay from the PC, PS4, Xbox One, Xbox One X, and PlayStation 4 Pro, which has actually all been rolling in the background throughout this video. This is a last-generation game at heart. It did start development during the Xbox One, PlayStation era, and they are going to hold you to that. But honestly, from the gameplay that they've shown so far on those platforms, the game still looks phenomenal. The PC gameplay that they showed went all the way up to 4K 60 FPS, and it looked phenomenal. On the PlayStation 4 Pro and the Xbox One X, the game was running at 1080p and 60 FPS, and on the base consoles, it was running at a 1080p 30 FPS. I just love that they are being super transparent about it. It allows people to make their decision. They did mention that they're going to come out with PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X gameplay in the coming days, but if the current generation consoles upgrades are anything to go by, I'm sure that we're going to be treated to something very nice. So all in all, that's really it. I didn't want to make this too in-depth of a preview. I know that there are other videos out there that go much more in-depth into the world of Biomutant. I just want to keep this a high level for the people that don't like to be spoiled too much, and I hope that you found this helpful. But anyway, that's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, remember to give it a thumbs up, and if you want to support the channel further, please consider subscribing. It would really help. I'll catch you next time.